Pete Buttigieg is Secretary of Transportation for a reason. He was a rising star in the 2020 presidential primary, and when it was all over, President-elect Joe Biden made it his mission to elevate the most talented of the Democrats' next generation, and that meant getting Buttigieg on the team. Right from the start, Buttigieg has made a career out of fostering innovation, doing the dirty work on getting infrastructure done, and establishing himself as the party's most articulate spokesperson, who cuts into Republican nonsense like a surgeon with a scalpel. Buttigieg is so good at slamming Republicans that he actually became a Fox News favorite, because horrifying your audience gets good ratings too. So it's no surprise that the Harris team already has him out on the circuit doing what he does best, laying waste to Republicans and their sheer and utter hypocrisy. Let's watch.
Do you think that there's someone she could pick as her vice president that would make him regret that choice?
Well, again, that's going to be her call, her process. But what I will say is that the choice of JD Vance is a regrettable choice, because he's somebody who was at his most convincing and effective when he talked about how unfit for office Donald Trump is. And he has not explained any reason, other than, of course, his obvious interest in power, why he would have changed his mind on that. Remember, JD Vance's whole identity is that he is connected to Appalachia, a place that is being hurt so profoundly by the opioid crisis. So the fact that he didn't just refer to Donald Trump as an idiot, though he didn't just say all kinds of things about how he was terrible, but compared Donald Trump to opioids, that is literally the darkest, most negative thing someone connected to Appalachia could possibly say about a politician. And that was in public, right? In private, he was comparing him to Hitler, reportedly. He has yet to explain why his opinion would be any different other than his own search for power.
So that critique of Vance is classic Buttigieg. No name-calling, no histrionics, and in fact, an acknowledgement of the positives that Vance himself has cast aside. Buttigieg goes after the facts, not the person, and it's what makes him so effective. So let's take a look at his reaction when JD Vance went after Secretary Buttigieg by doing just the opposite, by going personal.
Answer in the debate from both candidates was, I think, kind of confounding to everyone. But I'm glad you brought up children, because there's actually this answer that JD Vance gave a few years ago, and he name dropped you in it about people who don't have children working in the government. This is what he said.
It's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Now, I should note you have two children. They were born before Pete gave that answer. Harris is also a stepmom to children as well. But what's your response to that?
The really sad thing is he said that after Chasten and I had been through a fairly heartbreaking setback in our adoption journey. He couldn't have known that, but maybe that's why you shouldn't be talking about other people's children. And it's not about his kids or my kids or the vice president's family. It's about your family, people's families whose well-being will depend on whether we go into a future led by somebody like Kamala Harris, who is focused on expanding the prosperity, the freedom, the well-being of our families. And by the way, especially if you have kids and you're worried about climate, choosing between a party that has a plan on climate that creates jobs and a party that still calls it a hoax, even as we went through the hottest day in world history. Or do you want your children to grow up in a country defined by a return to the chaos and recrimination and cruelty that was the hallmark of the Trump era?
Now, that was just a signature move by Buttigieg, following the Michelle Obama plan. When they go low, you go high. And from on high, Buttigieg responded to a personal attack by talking about the personal, then moving it to the personal lives of the audience, and then moving it into politics. The word masterful comes to mind. Now let's watch some other clips from this interview.
He says, I watched Donald Trump in office. That's what changed my mind. You don't. You're not buying that.
That doesn't make any sense, especially coming from the Midwest. He's from Ohio. I grew up in Indiana and live in Michigan. I have seen how the industrial Midwest went into a manufacturing recession under Donald Trump and has experienced a manufacturing renaissance under the Biden-Harris administration. Why is that? Because the Biden-Harris administration has led on policies that have factories rising out of the ground of places, including places like near where I grew up, that haven't seen this kind of investment in a generation. How could JD Vance or anybody else initially think that Donald Trump is a disaster, watch him lead the country into a manufacturing recession? This is, by the way, before COVID, let alone everything that happened through the mismanagement of COVID, and then say, oh, now I've seen the light. He's a great leader, and I want to be on his team. I think we all know why JD Vance changed.
Well, and Donald Trump said today that he does want to debate Vice President Harris, maybe more so than once. One of the issues that
only after backing out of the debate he already agreed to, though, right? Somehow
today
citing
he has an issue with doing it with ABC.
Right, but he didn't when he agreed to it in the
Fox.
first place, right? I think the interesting thing about this is what changed from when he said he was ready to do an ABC debate and when he now says he's not. ABC didn't change. Donald Trump didn't change. But there's a new candidate, and clearly he hesitates to debate her on the exact same terms that he thought
So you think
would
he's
be okay. Afraid.
scared to debate her?
Yeah.
Why do you think so?
Because I think she is going to be so effective, and she's going to lay bare his inability to talk about anything but himself and his past. I think what you'll see is two things that I'm excited for Americans to see. Yes, the contrast, the way, as she laid out very powerfully, she, as a prosecutor who has defended people from people like Donald Trump, is going to remind everybody about that record, but also a contrast in governing records. She's going to be, I think, very effective in reminding Americans that on issue after issue, they already agree with us. They already agree with her and Democrats. Americans agree with Democrats and disagree with Donald Trump on taxes and his agenda of tax cuts for the rich. They agree with Kamala Harris, Democrats, and disagree with Donald Trump on his removal of the right to choose in this country. And gun violence, marriage, you can go on down the list. I think she's very well positioned to remind Americans of that.
Calm, clinical, precise, and powerful. Pete Buttigieg is the quintessential spokesperson for the Democratic Party and for America. He patiently waits for the opportunity to gently eviscerate the con artists that have turned the Republican Party into a cult. A combat veteran, a Rhodes Scholar, and former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, a city with a population of over 100,000 people. Not to mention Notre Dame students, because let's face it, keeping Notre Dame in line before and after they play Michigan is a Herculean task. And now the most successful Secretary of Transportation this country has ever seen. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, why is anyone talking about a bunch of older governors when you have Pete Buttigieg on the bench, ready and able to take the field? And we all know the answer to that question. It's because he's gay, and America's not ready for a gay vice president. Nonsense. That's what the pundits had to say about Obama. The country's not ready. And to all the experts spouting that line, let's just do some quick demographics. Who in America precisely is not ready for a gay vice president? Would that be young voters who turned out in record numbers in 2020? What, are we afraid of motivating them to an even bigger turnout? Is it the white suburban female voters who went to Trump in 2016 and have run away from him ever since? Urban Democrats? Yeah, they've never seen a gay person before. Who exactly are we afraid of losing? The rural vote? Seriously? Rural liberals are not going to stay home with a Harris-Buttigieg ticket. And we sure weren't making any inroads with a multiracial woman of color to begin with. Not with the rural conservatives. A Harris-Buttigieg ticket is not only unbeatable, it sets up an entire generation of Democratic success. So 2 words to Kamala Harris: Run with Pete. Math was never my forte. I'm Anthony Vincent Gallo for Occupy Democrats.